Okay, so I know not everyone knows what's going on. So what happened is I decided to go back to school, and I had decided I wanted to go into the mental health field. So right now I'm just working on my bachelor's, but I'm in a class where I have to do a community teaching project. I go out in the community, I teach about a subject that I got to pick, but since I'm going into mental health, hopefully, eventually, I wanted to do a mental health related subject. And it kind of morphed into this because I realized once I got going that it's not a subject that everyone likes to talk about, so it's kind of difficult. It was kind of difficult finding an audience and a place to do it and everything. But I think that this might be a God thing, though, because it's definitely something that we need to talk about. We want to be a little more open about talking about, especially, for ourselves, but also out in the community. Because when I started doing the class, I had to research statistics, and so U.S. statistics, state statistics, area statistics, and the mental health problems are on the rise, and suicide's a big problem, and we're just going to be running into this stuff. So, and tonight, like I said, I'm keeping it kind of short. I'm not a mental health professional, so I don't have a lot of information anyway. But even if I were going to try to share a lot of information, it's just I can't. I know everyone's not going to be able to retain it all tonight. So really, my goal for tonight is just, like I said, to just kind of raise a general awareness. Maybe just make us a little more comfortable talking about the issue. So for the class, for my project, I had to have a community mentor, someone who is in the field that I'm doing my project in, a professional. So Heather so graciously agreed to be here with us. Some of you know her, so thank you, Heather, for being here. She's a licensed counselor in the area and has been doing this, 16 years? So have a lot of experience. So afterward, if anyone has any questions or comments, it's just kind of laid back. So even during the presentation, if anybody wants to ask anything or say anything, Heather might be interjecting. She's seen my material, but she might want to add some things too, I hope. So, well, way more than I do. So what I did is I at the beginning of the class, I had to just pick some objectives, some things I wanted to focus on. So I just kind of outlined it into 3 things. And so I'll go through each thing kind of from a medical view and then from a biblical standpoint. So a lot of it's going to be a review. A lot of it's stuff we've heard before. Scriptures, of course, we've heard before. And there's a lot I didn't use. So y'all can do your own study on your own time. Again, this is just to kind of, just start to raise awareness, start to get us thinking about it. Oh, yeah. And I have little handouts I gave y'all. This isn't everything that I'm going to be talking about. It's just some highlights, just so you have something to look at while I'm talking. And then at the end, to rate if I've met my objectives or not, there's a little quiz for everybody. So pay attention. No math. And actually, it should all be in your handout. So the information that you need for the quiz should be there in your handout. But we can talk about it at the end, too, if anybody has any questions about that. So, okay. So my first objective was just talking about why we should care about our mental health. And so when I got looking into this, I was really dumbfounded, actually. I didn't realize these myself, even as a nurse, because I haven't really worked much in the mental health field until recently. So I didn't realize this was this close to our front door, for lack of a better way of saying it. So I start statistics-wise. So 46.4%, or nearly half of adults, will experience a mental illness during their lifetime. Again, this is medical statistics, so, Dave's statistics. It's different, of course. We'll talk about that in a minute. 1 in 5 adults and children will experience a mental illness every year. Psychiatric disorders are the leading cause of disability in the U.S. The World Health Organization estimates over 1 million people commit suicide every year. So these are where it just started to blow my mind, and I started to see, this is a big problem, a big area that the devil's able to work in right now. So 1 million people every year, which correlates into a person dies every 40 seconds from suicide in the world. 3,000 people a day. Just in the U.S., it's the second leading cause of death among people ages 10 to 34. There's a one death by suicide every 12 minutes in the U.S. There were more suicides than homicides. There were twice as many suicides as homicides. I don't know that year, sorry. And it's the 10th leading cause of death overall in all age groups. Arkansas statistics, there's a death by suicide every 14 hours in Arkansas. Also interesting, Arkansas is rated number 51. It's last for our access to mental health care. We have 8 mental health providers for every 100,000 people here in Arkansas. So that means that there's a lot of people here who need mental health care and don't have access to it. So that's why I say, we need to be aware of it for ourselves, but also in the community. Aubrey had a coworker with an issue just last week, a girl suicidal coming up to the coffee shop window. So you just don't know where you're going to be running into these. So a lot of churches are starting to get a lot more active in these things. And then in talking to Heather about, these statistics, of course, she agreed with Dave, this is just what's reported. There's a lot of instances of suicide that aren't called suicide. So this is just what we know. So the numbers are just staggering. One reason, several reasons why we should want to be aware and want to care about our mental health. So biblically, and in y'all's packet, I'm trying to make it quick for everyone, so I don't guess we need to open our Bibles and read every scripture. I'll just kind of highlight it. I gave y'all a sheet kind of toward the end of your packet where I've listed all the scriptures that I'm talking about today. So if you want to go back and read them or add to them or whatever, I'll just talk about them today. Do you have anything you want to say so far? Okay.
I think it's important when we're hearing statistics to realize those are only the things that are reported. Because mental health has such a stigma related to it, and seeking help is so stigmatized because people are deemed they're crazy or something's wrong with them. So many people do not seek help because of that. There's a lot of shame still associated with it. And so just one of my hopes as a counselor, a therapist in the community, is to decrease that stigma as much as possible, to find ways to really love on people and draw that out and let them know it's okay to go seek help. We want you to go do that and get the help that you need from trained people. Because a lot of times people think, you're sad. You just need to go talk to your best friend. Well, your best friend is not trained to hear what I hear. Your best friend's not trained to sit with and really handle what I'm trained to sit with and handle. And so, yes, your best friend is a great resource. Your parents can be really good resources. But they're not trained to hear the things that professionals are trained to hear and to really equip you with. And so one of the best things that we can do as a church and just as individuals is to really help decrease that stigma by education, by not shaming people when they are seeking help, by really encouraging them. And it's interesting because a lot of people will come into my office and still feel that stigma, and they're a little embarrassed and a little ashamed to sit with me. But 9 times out of 10, by the time they leave, they're telling people that they swore they would never tell, because they're realizing, hey, this actually really helps, and it's not a bad thing. It's actually, and they feel better. When they come in, they're like, that feels good to sit and talk about it. And so we want to encourage that, and we want to find good resources, because just like with doctors or mechanics or any other thing, not all therapists are good therapists. Not all of them have good motives or pure motives or really skills training the way that they need to. And so it's really being intentional as a church body to know your resources, and she's got several listed for you, but to know where those resources are and how to help direct people to those resources to encourage it. Because again, the statistics are staggering, but that's not even all that's there, because so much of it is not reported. So
okay. So, why should we discuss mental health? The first scripture, of course, is about our bodies being a temple, because it's just part of taking care of our body. We take care of our heart. We take care. If we have diabetes, we manage our diabetes. Some of the, Dave said when we were talking, some of the stuff that we have to deal with was handed to us. It's not our fault. It's just stuff that we were born with, or stuff that happened because of our circumstances or whatever. But we still have to learn to manage it. So. It's just part of us taking care of ourselves. It's part of us being overall healthy. So when I started doing this research, I also have a section here you'll see where it says Satan has less power if we are mentally healthy. And I got that because when I started doing this research, I found a really interesting analogy about bullfighting. And I didn't know anything about bullfighting, and I've talked to the ladies in study about this already, but I'll say it again. So there's a matador who's the guy that's trying to kill the bull, and which is the end game. That's the purpose of a bullfight. It's awful. I don't know why people do it or why people go see it, but they do. So I guess it's the whole man versus beast thing, and it's a big deal to go watch it. But so the matador's trying to kill the bull, and so. But every bull's different, and also it's dangerous. So he's actually in danger in trying to kill this bull, and so because every bull's different. When the bull comes into the arena, he'll study the bull. He's looking to see if the bull has any weaknesses, if he's limping, or if he leans to one side, or just anything that might be considered a weakness. But also he's studying the bull to see if he favors a place in the arena when he comes in the arena, because every bull will find a place that they favor in the arena. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So he's studying the bull. When then they start, he has assistant matadors, and, they start wounding the bull. They spear the bull. They put spears in his neck so he can't raise his head, and he bleeds out, and he gets weak. And, and then you've got the matador waving that red flag around. And the purpose of all that is to keep the bull reactive. It's to keep him angry, enraged, afraid, just every kind of emotion, I imagine, because as long as the matador can keep that bull reactive to him, he's in control of him. He can make him do whatever he wants. He's just reactive. He's emotionally reactive. Well, so they're apparently, though, bulls, they can find a place in the arena where they feel safe. They have a safe place in the arena. And and it has a name, and it starts with a Q, and I didn't write it down, but it's different for us anyway. It's not the Q, it's Jesus, and it's truth. But if he can find that safe place in the arena, he regains his strength. He's not reactive anymore. He's thinking more clearly, and that's when he's dangerous to the matador, because the matador can't control him anymore. He's not controlled by his emotions anymore. He's not reacting to the red flag, and he's not reacting out of fear, and he's not reacting out of rage, and he's calm, and he's thinking. And so that's when the matador becomes afraid of him. So I thought that was really interesting, likening that to Christianity, because that is exactly what the devil does to us. When you think about that matador, how he studied him from the time he walked into the ring. He knows every weakness. In our case, Satan's created some of our weakness. He knows it because he made it, and he's put stumbling blocks in our life and in our path every day, and he's wounded us. He knows where our wounds are. He knows what they are. He knows our weaknesses, and he knows how to make us reactive. He knows how to make us go different directions. He knows what makes us fearful. He knows what makes us enraged. So it's really important. This is part of mental health. This is, my version, my idea of it anyway. So, because it's a part of therapy. Is learning to pause, to find that pause that bull finds, to find that safe place and pause. Regain your strength. Gather your thoughts. Think about how you're going to react instead of just reacting emotionally. And I'll talk about that more in a little bit too. So that's one of the reasons that we want to begin to think about mental health. I thought that's why I want to think about it. And also, Pastor mentioned in a sermon a couple weeks ago the idea that Jordan Peterson had said where that our human nature, if somebody does something wrong to us, is to react by doing something wrong back to them. And then not only just to do it back to them, but to do something worse to them. It's our human nature, and it is. I mean, we see it in things like road rage. So Jordan Peterson didn't say this. This is Stacia saying this, but probably somebody somewhere said it. I don't know. I kind of flipped that and said, but so maybe if somebody does something bad to us and we do something good to them, we could flip it. That's how we battle. We could maybe, and not in all cases, I know, and maybe it would take several times of trying, but so maybe over time, if we can return love, if we can return good actions for somebody giving us bad, we're battling. That's how we battle. We can change. Somebody's battling us with Satan's way, and we're battling back with God's way. That's kind of how I see that. So we have to be sure that we're in a place mentally, because for several reasons, if we're not, we won't do that. We won't be able to pause, think about what we're going to do, and react and respond in a way that God would have us to, in a way that's going to benefit that person and us, in a way that's going to glorify God. So it all happens up here. And again, this is all stuff we know. It's just something I have to do for school, and a reminder never hurts. So that I just put the scripture Ephesians 4:14 about being tossed to and fro, because to and fro, it kind of made me think of that, and by every wind of teaching and by the cunning and craftiness of people. Of course, we know that's Satan, and so that's just what the scripture I had in mind when I think about how Satan can just lead us in any direction, toss us to and fro because of his lies, by lies. And then the Matthew 5:44. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute. This is what Jesus. So this is why I think that idea is founded. That if we return love for evil, I mean that's what Jesus tells us to do. So we know that's how we battle. In 2 Corinthians 10:3 and Romans 12:21, again the same ideas. Proverbs 16:32. I came across that this week. And I like that one a lot. I hadn't seen that before, but y'all probably have. But my translation says, better a patient person than a warrior, one with self-control than one who takes a city. So, we think of being warriors and powerful by force and by being strong. But Jesus tells us to do it a different way. He wants us to do it in love. Not that there's not there's not a time that we need to use force and, say a hard word or something, but we want to make sure it's all in love, we know. Anything you want to add? Okay. Okay, so next little section is who's at risk for mental illness. I found a neat little study. That's my main thing that I like to talk about, because we all would know if we think about it that childhood trauma, is kind of a given, puts people at risk for mental illness. There are many things, and I'll touch on a few more, but I just want to start and talk about this study because it did kind of enlighten me also. So in this study, they surveyed several people and determined how many people had what they called adverse childhood events. And the doctor talking about this said, it's not talking about losing a baseball game or failing a test. Things are going to happen, but it's talking about, abuse, neglect, domestic violence in the home, parental mental illness, and substance abuse in the home, things that are, pretty severe as children. And so they found that 67% of the population had one of these. So that's a large number of the population that's had some kind of abuse or neglect or some severe trauma in their life as children. And that 12.6% had 4 or more of these things. So that's pretty severe also when you're thinking about these things. Had some kind of... So, and then they found that the higher number of these that you have, the higher number of these ACE scores, the greater you are at risk for several health conditions as an adult. They figured out 2.5 more times more likely to have COPD, 3 times more likely to have lung cancer or heart disease, 4.5 times more likely to have depression and 12 times more likely to commit suicide. And yeah, people apparently came back and said it's obvious that if you have a bad childhood, you're gonna smoke, you're gonna do drugs, you're gonna engage in risky behaviors. But they actually found that even aside from those things, you're still at higher risk just because of what the trauma does to your body as a child. It physically changes your body. So, and that's what I wanted to point out too. So they found that these adverse childhood events actually affect children's brain development. They change their hormonal systems, their immune systems, and even change their DNA. So these are permanent things. These are things that people have that they don't realize they have sometimes. But, like Heather was saying, we can start raising awareness, and people can start to get help for these things. So that's one of the major things that puts people at risk. But, there's all kinds of trauma all through life. Separation or divorce, early widowhood, drug and alcohol use, chronic medical conditions, bullying in school, few friends and healthy relationships, grief and loss. Heather pointed out was a big one. Did you want to say anything about that, or just? When you're done, go over symptoms also. What? When you're done, go over your list also. That's pretty much it until we get to okay.
And one other thing to realize, these scores, this is newer research that we're learning about trauma and its severe effects on the population. But one thing that is interesting, because there is such a lack of education about what trauma actually is, that I've actually had people come sit in my office and I'm listening to their story and they just can't figure out why they're struggling with anxiety or having these flashbacks. Most people don't even realize that they've endured trauma, because as a culture, we minimize it so much. We minimize trauma. We minimize the adverse effects that she's talking about. We minimize the neglect and the damage that it can actually do. And so I sit with someone and they'll say, oh, this is this. And I'll go, that's trauma. You have endured significant trauma. Oh, no. It's not as bad as so-and-so or so-and-so or so-and-so. Well, sure. We all have different things that happen, and it will all affect us differently depending upon the environment we're in, the support systems that we have when that trauma happens. In fact, there was a study done on 9/11 because they were doing PTSD studies, and what they found were individuals that were able to immediately process what had happened actually had less trauma or less PTSD long term than those that didn't. If we have a healthy outlet, we feel safe, we have safe people to talk to, we can process our trauma. But because mental health is so misunderstood and so stigmatized, we tend to not talk about our trauma. Think about people that have been assaulted, whether sexually or physically. How often do those people not report it, not say anything, not talk about it? Well, what happens long term because they don't do those things? It affects them physiologically, emotionally, spiritually, on every level. And so part of it is just recognizing just a tragic loss can be a trauma. Witnessing a tragic car accident, even if you're not in it, is a trauma. And we minimize those things. We don't want to think about it. And so we need to talk about it, because when we talk about it, and actually the doctor, she's talking about the study, what she has is she has a clinic that now addresses the physical side, the medical side, as well as the counseling side. And it's amazing what they have been able to reverse in some of their patients by combining that. In fact, in one of her patients that this doctor had, the little boy had so much trauma, he had physically stopped growing. And once they were able to get the nutrition and the counseling and the things like that, he started making gains again. So it's a big deal, and it's important that we understand this. So I love that she's trying to do some community awareness, because a lot of times we minimize it. We don't want to talk about it. Even just within our homes, verbal abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, it happens. We interact with people on a daily basis that have endured these things. And so if we can learn how to respond to that when that happens, we can help minimize their long-term effects as a result of that.
Okay, so biblically and Dave's statistics, who's at risk is everyone. It's like Dave pointed out when I was chatting with him. It's true. You can't really get through the Bible without seeing, a lot of our major heroes in the Bible that struggled with some kind of mental distress, at least. So I put a few examples here for everyone. Paul in 1 Corinthians 1:8. We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired of life itself. I mean, that's pretty. And of course, David, all through the Psalms, but I put Psalm 38:4 on here. My guilt has overwhelmed me like a burden too heavy to bear. Jonah in 4:3. Lord, take my life, for it is better for me to die than to live. Jeremiah in 20:14. Why did I ever come out of the womb to see trouble and sorrow? So I don't know if I put them on there, but I mean, I think I did put the scriptures about, Satan being the god of this world and how he's out to steal, kill, and destroy. I mean, we're at war constantly, so we're all at risk, just like our great heroes in the Bible were. Oh, Job, of course. So anyway, biblical examples. Okay, so now what we can do. We know why we should care, and kind of that we're all at risk. So what can we do? Physically, of course, eat a healthy diet and exercise. It's always good for mental health. And get plenty of sleep. Teenagers, I actually read recently that you're supposed to get 9 to 10 hours of sleep a night. I know nobody does that, but try. It might help. Of course, and then, getting expert advice, getting medical advice. It's like we were talking about in that study in the physical ranges. There's chemical problems. There's physical problems. It can be in the brain. There's medications that can help balance the chemical problems. There's therapies that can help undo some of the physical problems. In some cases it can't be. Some things are permanent, just like we were talking about earlier with the diabetes, and we just have to learn how to manage it. But either way, medical professionals can help us to determine which one we might need, if anything. But I know not everyone can do that. So we'll just talk about some other things we can do too. So local resources in the area, like we can see counselors like Heather. So Heather is available. There are other, we have in our area, we have counseling associates. There's, Restored Life is another group of counselors. Turning Point, I think that's an inpatient facility for that. Freedom House and Hope House, we kind of know about those. They're inpatient for drug and alcohol rehab. One good thing to know, there's a lot of resources online. So like I said, you guys, if you just want to start doing your own research, I know that's what I've been doing a lot of lately. So Heather recommended Psychology Today, and I found a lot of information on the National Institute for Mental Health. And Heather also recommended RAIN.org. It's another online site. And a sexual assault hotline. I guess I didn't write that down, did I?
RAIN.org.
Okay.
RAIN specifically targets sexual trauma and sexual abuse, and it's a great resource, even because a lot of times that's not something that maybe people will initially want to go seek help with. Maybe they want to go and just in the privacy of their home read information or have resources. RAIN is a great website to do that. And they also have a hotline, just like the National Suicide Hotline. Those are good numbers to have handy just to encourage people with, because they can call and talk to someone who's trained to handle those kinds of conversations. It's okay. If you're not equipped to do that, don't even try to do it. Don't. Instead, refer to someone that is equipped to do that. Because if you're not equipped and you don't feel comfortable, that person will recognize that, and then they may not feel safe talking to anybody else. if that makes sense. So if that is not, but if you know, hey, this is not really something I can do, but I have this resource for you, that's going to invite them to go seek that out. And those are great websites with great information. And then when they're ready, then they will, move forward with counseling or whatever that they need. So.
Okay, so I took a few ideas from some therapy ideas and kind of applied them scripturally. So just in what we can do right now to kind of start thinking about it and making some efforts toward our mental health. So there's studies that show, and our pastors talked about this a little bit, about act to see the fact. So, and I put a little diagram in y'all's thing. It's a triangle because we know now that actions, behaviors, and emotions are all connected. So if you change any one of those, you're going to change the other two. So if you change your actions, you're going to change your emotions and your thoughts. Am I saying that right? Y'all can see it. You get the idea. So that principle, and also something that also our pastor shared several months ago about a study done that that showed us that if you, how do you say it? If you experience an emotion, it'll flag a memory. So if something happens to us that causes an emotion, our brain will flag that into our memory. But also, my therapist told me about this therapy idea that, so what she does is have you think about something until you feel an emotion about it, and that's going to kind of lead you in that direction. Because when you feel something emotionally, you're going to remember it and you're going to want to gravitate toward it. Kind of like you go in the direction of your most dominant thought. If you think about it a lot, you feel something about it, you're emotionally connected to it, that's where you're going to go. That's what you're going to do. That's what you're going to think. That's what you're going to, So scriptures about our thoughts. And like I said, probably we can all think of more than what I have here. I just put a couple so we can get the general idea. In 2 Corinthians 10:5, to take every thought captive. And Romans 12:2 about being transformed by the renewing of our minds. So there again, that kind of tells us what we think kind of transforms us. We renew our minds, it transforms everything else. Colossians 3:2, set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. So very important what we're thinking about. Actions, Psalm 34:14, turn from evil and do good. So we do good, seek peace and pursue it as an action. Ephesians 4:15, we speak the truth in love. So again, an action. What we speak is an action. And we speak truth. Ephesians 4:23, to put on the new self in action. What we're doing. It's what we do that changes us. And then the scripture I applied to the emotion section it's actually, I think I got it right on y'all's. Psalm 119:97. Oh, how I love your law. I meditate on it all day long. So that's what David did. He meditated on God's law, and he loved God's law. And the thinking about God's law made him emotionally connected to God's law. And so that was the direction he was going to go. So again, just back to if we keep the triangle thing in mind, that if we change an action, it's going to change the other two. If we change a behavior, it's going to change the other two. And then we have these examples in the Bible. In Philippians 4:8-9, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. So our thoughts. In John 8:32, then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And I put under there, because that's just the conclusion I came to, that the truth is our safe place in the arena. Whatever the devil tries to do, wherever he tries to make us go, it's because of his lies. And so if we always go back to truth, if we always go back to that safe place, the truth, where we're thinking truth, we're speaking truth, we're acting truth, we're meditating on truth, That's our safe place. That's where we're going to regain our strength. That's where we're going to get our thoughts back clear again. And we're not going to be reactive. We're going to react in truth. We're going to react in God's way. Anything you want to say before I move on? Okay. Okay, so I wanted to do just a special section on suicide because it was kind of hard to fit in with everything else. And it is just something that we kind of want to target because, again, we could run into it. It could be closer to home than we think sometimes. In fact, I didn't put it on y'all's, but I was trying to find statistics in the church, and I found one site that said 32% of Protestant churchgoers have had a close family member or acquaintance take their life. 32% in the church. So risk factors for suicide are going to be really similar to any mental health disorder, but we'll go over some more acute ones too. But separation or divorce, early widowhood, prior thoughts of suicide or suicide attempt, history of self-harm behavior, parental history of violence, substance abuse, mental illness and divorce, history of impulsive or reckless behaviors, depression, anxiety, or a diagnosed mental health disorder, a substance abuse disorder, chronic pain, exposure to suicidal behaviors. So people who know someone who either have commit suicide or have attempted suicide are more likely to attempt suicide or commit suicide. A physical illness or disability. And I think I gave y'all a paper that lists some of these. There's a couple papers on suicide specifically. Just so you can take those home and remember dropping everything. So some red flags. You want to get someone help pretty quickly if you see any of these things in them. Talking about feeling empty, hopeless, or having no reason to live. Talking about guilt or shame. Talking about feeling trapped or feeling that there are no solutions. Feeling unbearable pain, physical or emotional. Talking about being a burden to others, using alcohol or drugs more often, acting anxious or agitated, withdrawing from family and friends, changing eating and or sleeping habits, showing rage or talking about seeking revenge, taking risks that could lead to death, such as reckless driving, displaying extreme mood swings, suddenly changing from very sad to very calm or happy, and giving away important possessions. So if you guys see anyone at your workplaces or school or wherever, and that they've just recently gone through a divorce or whatever, and they're displaying any of these, you might want to talk to them, and we'll talk about what to do in just a second. But big red flags, you want to act immediately, probably. If someone is talking about wanting to die, if they're planning or looking for a way to kill themselves, such as searching for things online, stockpiling pills, or acquiring lethal items like guns or anything, or talking about death, dying, or suicide when those actions are out of the ordinary for the person. So, again, in some cases, you might feel like you just need to call 911 if someone's just saying that, actively talking about committing suicide. So what do we do if we think someone's suicidal? We ask, are you thinking about killing yourself? So a lot of people think if you ask them, you're planning a thought in their head, and you're not. That's just a myth. You can talk to them about it. Keep them safe. Don't leave them alone. Take any access that they have to any weapons or anything they could hurt themselves with. Be there and listen. Acknowledge their feelings. A lot of people, behaviors are, they stem from something. Even if it's acting out, it's coming from a need for something that they haven't, that they're not getting. They're reaching out for something. So, don't ever think that someone's just trying to get attention or, just acting out to get attention. Because even if that was the case, it's still stemming from a need. It's still something that needs to be addressed. So always take them seriously if they're talking about hurting themselves. You can call 911. There's a suicide prevention hotline number on there. Or you can, tell them about some, if it's not anything acute, you could just talk to them about some of the other resources that we know available in the area. But the main thing is don't leave them alone. And don't ever tell them that you're going to keep a promise to them that that you're going to keep their thoughts a secret because you need to get them help. So don't make them any promises that you can't keep. Do you want to add to that? I think that's it, because the rest is on the handout then. So, okay, I think that's it. That was the end of mine. Okay.
So if someone came to you and said, I want to kill myself, what would you do with it? Would you panic? Freak out a little bit? What do you think you would do? What? Yeah?
I would tell them I love them,
Mm-hmm.
I need them, and is there anything I can do to help you? Can we talk about this?
Perfect. Perfect. I think a lot of times what happens is we get scared and feel like if I don't do something, they're going to go home and kill themselves and it's all my fault. And so we get paralyzed. Instead of the fight or flight response, we paralyze. And so Granny's response was perfect. They don't need you to fix what's wrong in their life. More often than not, they already know kind of maybe what they need to do, but maybe they don't know the exact steps or the resources or maybe how to go about that. So sometimes the best gift we can give is just a willingness to listen and not freak out. To go, okay, I sit with suicidal people on a daily basis. I sit with people that frequently have suicidal thoughts with no intention of harming themselves. They're just really struggling, and they're struggling with the thought of, life would just be better for everyone if I weren't here. Or, I'm so overwhelmed, and I don't know what to do with this, so it'd just be easier if I wasn't here. But if we shut that conversation down, guess what's more than likely going to happen? They will eventually take their lives. But if we're willing to invite that conversation, say, I love you, I care about you, I just want to be here for you, let's talk about this. And we don't shame them or make them feel like, oh, I'm going to go put you in the hospital today. Then we invite a conversation that allows healing to begin to happen. And if they need other resources, like inpatient care or intensive one-on-one therapy, okay, let's get them those resources. But we don't have to shut that conversation down. But 9 times out of 10, out of our own fear, that's what we do. Because we think, oh, if they're having thoughts, they're going to act on it. And I will say more often than not, that's not true. That's not. And so don't be afraid to have that conversation and realize we don't need to fix it. We just need to be present and sit with them and then direct them to the resources. If they're acute, like what Stacia was talking about, yes, call 911. Get resources. In fact, suicidal thoughts or self-harm or homicidal thoughts is a breach of confidentiality I can break all day long because it's that important. And she's right. Don't make promises to keep those kinds of things a secret, that you're not going to tell anybody. Because more than likely, you're going to end up telling somebody, and they're going to feel that that's a betrayal of trust, and they're not going to want to open up and talk to you. And so don't make that promise. Say, you know what I will promise is we'll find a way to get you help. I can't promise you I'm not going to tell anyone what you're telling me. I will keep it as private and confidential as possible, but there are certain people that need to know what's going on, and I want to help you connect with those people. Okay? So, perfect. Good response. You passed the test.
Now, if everyone else can pass their test.
You made it a hard test.
What?
I was expecting yes and no. You missed 3 exams.
I was under a lot of pressure, Dave.
Writing 3-page essay on nature.
Does anybody have anything they want to say or any questions since Heather's here?
Yes, I have a question. You mentioned something that fascinated me when you were speaking. You said that after post 9/11, that those who were able to process more quickly experienced a lot less ongoing negative outcomes. And my question, and you sort of addressed it, but not as fully as I would like. What do you mean by processing? Like, what does that mean? Speak to a professional, and that answers that question.
The key is not just the processing, but the feeling of safety. If we don't feel safe when trauma happens, or we don't feel that we have a safe place to process, trauma can actually intensify. But what they found, especially like in children, when they had a safe place to go home and talk to mom and dad or draw pictures or talk about what was going on, but they felt safe, they immediately felt safe and protected, then it minimized further trauma. Right. And so that would be true. Am I right to say that it's just the opposite of ignoring it and hoping they don't? Exactly. Like the worst thing you can do is ignore it and pretend like it didn't happen. But what's our natural reaction? Because we don't talk about mental health. We don't talk about trauma. We want to sweep it under the rug. We don't educate our families or people how to lean into those hard things and their uncomfortable feelings and emotions, so we want to sweep them away, or because we don't know what to do with it. When really the best thing you can do in those situations is sit down and say, hey, just talk to me. Tell me what's going on. Let's talk about this. But yes, that will minimize the overall impact of trauma if we can immediately find a place of safety and are able to process it.
Any other questions?
So basically what you're saying is when there's trauma and you can safely go to that, then there's less likely that it's going to, I mean, you said that there would be less trauma. I read this book by Malcolm Gladwell, David and Goliath, and he kind of went into that, I guess.
I haven't read the book, but I've heard.
But does it, in some situations, do you think, since the person went through that trauma, that it increased them to a better outcome? Like it affected their life in such an instance that trauma, or just a trauma that they had to deal with in their life, increased that they like their education process. Indeed, I mean, the education process and job-wise, it increased their how to say it. Just overall life, that something that was dramatic, it doesn't always have to end bad. I guess that's what I'm saying.
It doesn't always have to end.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's obviously going to have an impact. The trauma itself will always have a little bit of an impact, but it does not have to increase in time. Because what we find is when we don't deal with trauma, it intensifies. It builds on itself. It builds to the point that it can increase paranoia. It can increase hypervigilance. All the symptoms of PTSD can really escalate. But if we process through it safely and we learn how to deal with it in a healthy way, all of those things minimize to where then we're more empowered to lean into those things educationally or work-wise, or just even reaching out in the community and being able to sit with someone who's maybe going through a trauma or has experienced a trauma and go, hey, I can sit with you with this and I get it. And so, but overall, the long-term effects will be significantly reduced if we're able to process pretty soon after it happens. Yeah. Yeah, showing empathy and leaning into it rather than trying to minimize and ignore it.
Any other questions? Comments? Should I give another one?
I do, for sure, but I'm just trying to be quiet because I don't want to just take over. You know what I'm talking about. Well, sure. Not a reason. I guess I'll go ahead and do it.
Okay.
So, first of all, you just said a phrase to lean into it that reminded me of Brene Brown. Are you a fan? All right. So she's helped me a lot, and that actually was my question. There's some people who have written books, like I think it was Cloud who did Boundaries. That was real important to me early. Brene Brown has helped me a lot. Jordan Peterson has helped me a lot. So knowing what you do for a living, are there authors and or seminal books that you think would be helpful? I have kind of a personal list of people that I found helpful, but I'd be interested if you do and if you would share that. Or the bottom. I mean, whatever's close by. And I'm not, look, don't give me I don't want a long list. I mean, even just personally. I'm not asking professional advice. I just mean to say, like if I were going to list some, Peterson would make my list. Brene Brown would absolutely make my list.
They have great stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, they both have stuff separately that is really good on boundaries. But they also have great stuff just on life stuff. They've written some books separately on anger and love and relationships. Gary Chapman is good. Irvin Yalom. Yalom, Yalom. He's written several good things. Okay.
The reason that I ask is walking through those things, it gives me tools
Mm-hmm.
and insights.
Absolutely.
So you've been looking at it longer than I've been looking at it.
Yeah. Larry Crabb even has some really good stuff. Larry Crabb. Mm-hmm. I don't think so. I don't know if he sings. I know he writes books. Oh, no, I don't think it is. And he wrote one connecting that I really enjoyed, just about how to connect with people and relationships and what that looks like. So, and Kurt Thompson. He has written several books on shame, like The Anatomy of the Soul, and there's another one on shame. I can't remember the title, but his stuff is really good. I really like his stuff.
Any more?
What's the answer to number 3?
Oh. Well, we can go over it if anybody. Just keep it simple, guys. I mean, if you were going to say, risk pursuit. Yeah.
Do we have to turn this in tonight? Before you leave, you go out the door.
Thank you, everyone, for coming, supporting me. And thank you, Heather. And we'll just see what God does with this.